My name is George Petrides, and I'm the sculptor and creator of these 6 heads, which we call Hellenic heads. I have been asked to explain a little bit about how they came to be, and they came to be because I wondered what are the themes that make someone a Greek American or a Greek living in Greece. So in structuring that, I looked for historical periods that I thought influenced such people. For example, ancient Greece is something we grow up with and we're told we're the inventors of democracy. The Greek Revolution is important in defining national identity. And then what happened in the 40s and the destruction of Smyrna in the 1920s. These are the historical periods that I studied. And from these historical periods, I developed 6 different heads. For each of the 6 heads, I looked for some sculptural precedent. For example, I looked in Rome or in Paris or at the Metropolitan Museum in New York for sculptures that inspired me that might have something to do with these same themes. And for each of the 6 heads, I asked a family member to pose. So my mother posed as the ancient Greek sculpture. My father posed as the Byzantine sculpture, which was important in establishing Christianity in the Western world and the Catholic Church being one part of it. As I developed these pieces, I had to use what I consider cutting-edge technologies, and combining them with traditional technologies. So in each case, I started with clay, just old-fashioned clay coming out of the river, and I made something with my hands. From there, I used a scanner, and I scanned the clay head and put the file into some software. I used Blender specifically, and there I manipulated the file. I might have made the nose a little different or the eyes a little different. Once I had the 3-dimensional object or the digital dimensional object, I printed it out. So in my studio, we have our own 3D printers, and I created a head of an appropriate size for me to then come back into the physical world and work on. So once I had that object, I would once again sculpt it. So I would add to it and cut it and maybe make it taller by adding a sternum or maybe change the angle of the head. So in this way, I combined the traditional with the latest technology that's available these days. This first of the Hellenic heads is called Thalia. It comments on the classical Greek period, which is around the 4th century before Christ. And it's a period which I studied as part of developing this head and the other heads. In looking at this period, I found a statue in the Vatican called Thalia, which I found moving and beautiful, and I started working on this piece. As I did so, it acquired the characteristics of my mother from a photograph from about 1950. And so this piece combines some Greek history, a specific sculpture that I like, and of course my family relationship with my mother. This head is inspired by the Byzantine period, which is about 1,000 years in length, but specifically about a period of time in the 300s to late 300s AD, or a Common Era. And it's about that period in time when Christianity was made legal and then eventually became the official religion of the Roman Empire. It's inspired by my father, who was a sea captain, and I felt that his gaze, being one of clear vision and leadership, was appropriate for Constantine. And Constantine was the specific statue that I found at the Capitoline Museum in Rome. A version of it exists at the Met. And so I combined this thread of Greek history with this specific statue with my father posing for it. This historical period is about the Greek Revolution from the Turkish or the Ottoman Empire, which occurred in the 1820s. When I was studying this period, I found that there were 3 Greek military leaders who were female, and it was unusual then and unusual now that they led men into battle. And so as I was researching this period, I focused on this phenomenon. I found someone whose name, near and dear to me, whose name is Liberty. And so I thought this is the right model. And I referred to a sculpture by Cordier that exists in the Louvre and also traveling to the Metropolitan where I saw it. So I combined this research into this historical period with a strong woman, and it and some of my other sculptures are about female leadership and the importance of women throughout Greek history from ancient times until the present. This piece is called The Refugee, and it refers to a historical period that affected many Greek families. Specifically, 1922 was a time when the then new Turkish nation was expanding and expelling Greeks from what is now Turkey. And there were hundreds of thousands of people, up to 1 million people that were displaced, including my own grandmother, my mother's mother. So this piece talks about that period. I looked at a sculpture by Michelangelo, which he actually carved for his own grave and exists in Florence, and that influenced, although it's male, that influenced how I thought about the head and this cowl and the shroud. And so my grandmother, who actually was a refugee in that period, posed for it, as it were. She's long since passed away. Her name was Maria, so I saw references to Renaissance statues, for example, with the Virgin Mary in producing this piece. This sculpture is called Man of Two Wars, the Greek and the Jew, and it is about the period of the 1940s in Greece. It was an awful decade. The first half of it was the Nazi occupation, where there was starvation and violence, of course. And as that concluded in 1945, a civil war broke out between leftist and rightist elements within the government, and it was a period of brother killing brother. For this, the sculptural precedent was a Rodin head that many people know from the burghers of Calais, which I had seen in Paris, and actually a cast of it exists at the Metropolitan in New York. And the figure that inspired it is myself. It's a self-portrait of perhaps less happy times in my own life. This last piece of the 6 Hellenic heads is called Kori, which in Greek means daughter, but it's also the name of the ancient Greek statues of women. The model is my daughter from about a year ago, and I chose it to represent the present in Greece. Greece is, leaving aside a wonderful tourist destination, it's a country with a lot of issues, and I was interested in capturing some innocence and some optimism looking about the future, but also some perhaps a quizzical expression of what this country is and what it might become. I believe that each of these statues has a universality, and I hope that if you come to visit, you'll learn about our Greek culture, and maybe there's some things where you'll say, okay, well, this relates to my daily life.